Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Jessica Mazzia DeLong, and I work at the Career Development Center. So today's workshop is really focusing on kind of taking your resume to the next level, the next step. So this is really assuming that everyone here has a resume. So I took a look to see who had registered, and I can see that some of you have just graduated, some are more recent alumni, and others are still students. I saw a number of juniors as well, and even a first-year student. So this is kind of geared towards taking that resume to the next step, kind of towards graduation or after graduation or as a recent alum. And then, yeah, any questions, just let me know and I'm gonna get started. If my presentation will work. All right, the slide. Okay, there you go. The keyboard doesn't want to work. So what is a resume? So I imagine you all know what a resume is, right? You know, you can pretty much tell me what it is, but I really want to talk about like, what is it? What you should be, you know, thinking about the resume now. Sorry, I'm hiding my video so I could see my screen. So a resume is a self-marketing publication. So really highlighting your skills, experience, accomplishment. So it's really part of your package as you start to think about how you want to brand yourself and how you want to present yourself professionally. This can be to employers, this can be to graduate schools, really whatever is next for you. When you're thinking really more towards a job, what you really want to think about is somebody's going to be reviewing this resume, a recruiter, a hiring manager, and what do I want them to see? How do I want them to see me? A resume should be focused to match the job you want, and it should focus to the different jobs you're applying to. I'm not saying you have to have 50 versions of your resume, but you know, you may be applying to some similar positions, but a little bit different. So for example, myself as an example, when I was applying to jobs a long time ago, I had a resume that was more focused for high school guidance, one for career, one for advising, one for opportunity programs. They were similar. My experience did not change much on them. The placement of information changed, certain keywords changed, my summary or highlight section changed. So that is important to kind of think about depending on the types of experiences you're applying to. And this can go for internship or job. Sorry, I will be drinking water throughout. Resume is a living document. So even if you are not in a current job search, you should continually update the resume with your skills, coursework, new experiences. This is important, especially, you know, if you wind up in a position for a bit, you know, you want to kind of know what you're doing and keep things fresh. And this really, you know, I'm talking about resume mostly today. We'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn later, but this goes towards LinkedIn as well, or any other professional presence that you have, to really kind of think of it as something that really should continually be updated. So it's also an ever-changing document. So resume format and what you include will change throughout your career. And you know, it really is kind of staying on top of that and whatever industry you're working in to know what you would need to do. And really it's a tool for entry. The resume, the main purpose is to get the interview, is to get in front of somebody. And that's really why you have this. Are there any questions? Just gonna check the chat just in case. Okay, it looks like we're good for right now. So let's see if this will work. No. Okay, slide. Okay. So transitioning the resume to kind of post-purchase to after college, you know, whether that is something that you've recently graduated this past May or prior to that, or you're entering senior year now. So really you want to sharpen and focus what you're applying for. Of course, that comes first, right? Because you need to know what you're applying to, the types of opportunities, doing some research on that before you can start making updates to the resume, tailoring the resume. And again, that goes to kind of updating the different versions of your resume. So I do want to just stop for a second, just say like what I'm talking about today is mostly going to be kind of your general resume. So I won't be talking about performance-based resumes today, but that is something that we can help with. We'll talk a little bit about some performance-related sections that can be on a resume, but a true performance-focused resume won't be talking about today. This will be more like general job internship, just so you guys know. So now as you kind of think about that, thinking about have you updated your resume recently? Thinking about the things that you may have done, especially for those of you who just graduated or entering senior year, things that should be on your resume. So maybe college related information, so senior project, and we'll talk a little bit more about all of these as we go through. If you were a teaching assistant, were you on any campus committees? Were you on campus in campus shows? Did you have exhibits, presentations? And then even beyond that, campus or just not campus, leadership experience. Did you have projects, whether personal, academic, professional, accomplishments, honors? Have you had the chance to be published or, be published with, a co-author? Have you been involved in professional development? There are professional development opportunities for students, and you may be involved as a student member. So really kind of think about things you've been doing and make sure that they are reflected. And I would say for those of you who are on LinkedIn, and hopefully all of you are, knowing, even starting with LinkedIn can help because you're not as much dealing with formatting or space issues, getting everything onto there. And then kind of seeing where to fit on the resume can help too, but at least you have somewhere where this is constantly being updated, maybe in an easier fashion. So all of this information can be highlighted under different headings depending on your focus, and we'll look at some examples of that. And you can really customize your categories and your headings depending on what you want to present and the areas that you want to focus on, and we'll talk about that too. You really start thinking about focusing on your output instead of your input, simply saying the results of your work, not just the tasks, and we're going to go a little bit further there. You want to quantify when you can, so really thinking about things you've done showing results. So for example, let's say you had an internship or like a part-time job as a social media marketing assistant. And while you were there, you really helped increase engagement on Instagram. And you have some numbers to back that up. You could see the percentage of increase. That is something that can go on the resume. And then really demonstrate what you accomplished and the skill you used. The reason I put this here is because sometimes I see in our resumes the candidate like slipping into writing more of a job description than talking about themselves, more about something like you would read as if you were applying to the job. Are there any questions? Just gonna check the chat. All right, I think everyone's good. And if anyone has any issues hearing me or if I'm talking too fast, just pop into the chat and let me know. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about skills. So I really want you to start thinking about your skills, which you imagine already have. You've already started to present yourself professionally, but really think about these two different categories of skills. So transferable and career specific. Transferable skills are those skills acquired through personal professional experience. So basically any talent or skills developed and to be able to use. Oh, look at that, it went. Sorry, guys. I'm talking with my hands. Okay. And this could be from any position, any job. So things like ability to plan, being results oriented, communication skills, problem solving, managing projects. And the reason these are really important is because I imagine most of you have had jobs that are not going to be towards your career path, meaning it's not what you want to do. But there's so many skills that you've developed there, so it's really important to think about what you have accomplished and those skills. And then there are more career-specific skills. Skills and knowledge that are required for a specific position, right? So this could be specific software that you need to know, specific equipment, specific skills such as editing, research, interviewing, something that you know you have to work on, in whether it's in your academics or other trainings, internships to develop. Any questions? All right. Okay, so focusing on the output and not the input. So we're going to talk about this a little, and then maybe somebody will volunteer to give their own example of this or have a question about how to describe this. So an input is any action taken at work, right? It can be very simple, right? Answering the phone. The output is the final benefit of that input. So for example, some of you may have worked as a student assistant on campus. So if somebody worked, so the student assistants, let's say we had working in the Career Development Center, you know, they could say, well, I answered the phone, or they could say they communicated with students, alumni, faculty, staff, and employers and educated them on how to, the services of the Career Development Center and ensure that their questions were answered, you know, really leading to satisfied clients, right? So you really want to think about what that next step is. So even like creating displays, working more in retail. So thinking about what that does. So that could really, it could be designing attention-grabbing presentations of merchandise that increase customer interest. And maybe you know that that product was sold at a higher rate, leading to an increase in sales. Serve customers food, right? I mean, this one sometimes is a harder one. It's a job that, you know, a lot of people have. But really kind of think about what you're doing there, the customer service, the knowledgeable service, the repeat customers. What is the output of what you've done? Are there any questions? Is anybody willing to, in the chat or unmute yourself, kind of either ask how to describe something you've done or give an example of a way you have been able to kind of focus on the output? Or, you know, say like, I do this and I have no idea how to say it. Don't worry if you don't, I'll bug you more at the end. And no? Okay. Well, feel free to enter anything in the chat and we can always get to it in the next slide as well. Okay. Oh, let me. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how to describe. So we're going to start now, initially to have a little talk about maybe those like part-time jobs, those jobs that may not be career related, right? So something to really think about. You want to focus on the transferable skills, as we already discussed, and your output. Really think about that. Really think about what you did and what the result of that is, and the skills that you were building. Problem solving, team leading, you know, being able to learn different systems and software. Really think about that. You also want to show progression in skills responsibilities for longer term jobs. So I see a number of students who have been working a part-time job throughout their college experience, or going back to the same job every summer. And often your title isn't changing, you're still in that same position, but because you've been there longer, you have had more responsibilities trusted to you. So that could be training new staff, that could be being a shift leader, that could be just having a bit more responsibilities than somebody else in that position. So really think about if there's a progression. There doesn't have to be a progression in title, but if there's a progression in responsibility. And really the important thing is that all experience is valuable. That is key. And that is not just coming from me. You know, when we speak to employers, we say, you know, they tell us that, you know, everything. They want to see what you've done. It doesn't have to be fully described, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they really want to see what you have been doing in college, as well as, you know, for those of you who have recently graduated, obviously what you've been doing after college. So we have a speaker that comes every year from Simon and Schuster, and I love it because she always says, she tells the people looking at the resumes, she's the head of HR, that I want to see people who worked at Denny's. For those of you who don't know, Denny's is like a diner-like restaurant, because she says when she sees somebody who has that type of experience, she knows that they can handle a lot of different things, a very busy environment, be able to do 5 things at once, and have that customer service and that demeanor that she's looking for. So all experience is valuable. So here's just 2 examples. So let's say childcare. Some of you may have been doing this type of part-time work, so it's easy enough to say, like, I take care of kids, right? But what are you doing? You're maintaining a safe play environment. You're communicating with parents about daily activities. You're implementing creative and educational activities. So if any of you have been a cashier, right? I check customers out. Well, you're greeting them, and you're maintaining the sales floor. Maybe you're exceeding monthly credit card goals 3 months in a row. Again, quantifying. Determining customers' needs. So really, think about what you've done on those part-time positions as well. Let's see. Any questions? I'm going to just check the chat. Okay, I think we're good. Okay. So now let's talk about describing some maybe more of those career-related jobs and internships. So one thing is really to focus on skills developed and those that you are still developing. So this includes putting skills in multiple places on the resume. So first, let's just focus on skills developed and developing. Sometimes you have started to work on something, maybe a specific hard skill. So maybe it's using specific lab equipment. Maybe it's a specific software, but you're at more of a introductory level to it. Well, you can qualify that on the resume, right? You could say intermediate, you could say beginner in front of something, whether it's a language or a software. But putting in multiple places means that if you're applying somewhere where they want you to use Adobe Photoshop and InDesign, you don't just want that in your skills section. If you can also mention it when you're describing some specific experience. If it's seen multiple places on the resume, it's going to sink in more to the person or tracking system reading it. So really think about that too. Really focus on the output. I know we've already talked about that, but one of the things that sometimes I see is a hesitation because let's say you were an intern and you're part of this larger team and you're feeling, well, I was just an intern and I just did this, but that's not true. Really think about what you did as part of a team. So you can say something, even if it was with help. So worked as a team to coordinate and implement the annual fundraiser, right? Again, which results in donations exceeding the goal by 50%. Quantifying if you can. For some, you may have had internships or other types of experiences that were more observational. So this could be, sometimes we see this for students who are pre-health, who are looking, maybe shadowing doctors or other professionals and don't get as much hands-on experience, but observational experience is important too. So really you can, for those instances, describe what you observed and describe what you learned. And then really understanding application tracking systems. So what is an application tracking system? So an application tracking system is what it sounds like. For definitely some large organizations, companies, and some mid-size, they may use software to scan the resume for certain keywords, whether it's in titles or skills or experience, first, to kind of weed some out. So you really want to pay attention to the job description and keywords to help your experience skills. So definitely this is where reading job descriptions that you're interested in and helping that shape your resume comes into play. Because you may start seeing things that are repetitive too, like, wow, these are 5 positions I'm really interested in, and they all mention this, and I have this skill, but it's really not fleshed out on my resume. So let me make sure that it is. You can definitely focus, you don't have to go crazy, but definitely you want to think about things like position titles and specific hard skills. So position titles, for example, here's just a simple one. At Purchase, if you are a teaching assistant in a class, you're called a learning assistant most of the time, whereas everywhere else, it's probably called a teaching assistant. If you're applying in education and you think they'd like to see that you were a teaching assistant, you may decide to change the title to that. And that kind of, that's just one example of many. So that also can take some research. As you're looking for jobs, you may keep seeing titles. They're like, oh yeah, that's what I did in the past, but it was titled differently. So let me make sure I'm getting that in there somewhere. And then really you can use the summary or skills section to feature keywords that you pull from the job posting as well. And we'll talk a little bit more of that too. So I think I have someone in the chat. Okay, yeah, that's not just a hello. Are there any questions right now? No? Okay, I'll go on to the next slide and have some more. So just to say again, we're going to look at some sample resumes and sample sections of resumes. What I'm showing you today are really just kind of simple resumes. There's many ways you can format, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, I'm kind of focusing on the more general resume. I put in the chat initially links to our resume guide page on the website, which has links to our artist resume book, as well as our job seeker success book, which has samples. And we'll talk about other places to find samples of formats as well. So the main thing with the resume is really, you don't want to get stopped at the basics, right? So for a resume, no use of personal pronouns, which I imagine you probably all know now. You want clean, clear, concise formatting that's easy to read, easy on the eyes of anyone looking at it, whether most likely is going to be on a screen. You want a length appropriate for field, and that could be a whole other conversation. I'm happy to answer questions about that as well. But really, usually at this stage in the game, most likely you're looking at a one-page resume, but that's not always the case, and definitely not for certain, if you're in academia, if you're applying to graduate school, if you are in research, right? So it is definitely not one size fits all, and definitely happy to answer questions about that. Obviously, typos, spelling errors, appropriate email address, these are all things to think about. So you'll notice in this sample that education is up top, because for Amy, Amy thought the education was the first thing that they wanted to show on the resume. Mostly, usually if you are still a student or just recently graduated, most likely your education will still be close to the top, whether it's the first section, depends if you have like a skills section or a summary section first. But it really does change throughout your career, and it depends. For me, for example, my education after my highlight section is still always up top because I need them to know that I have a master's degree in counseling. So that's key. But in other fields, it'll go right eventually down to the bottom. So you'll also see here kind of two ways that you can include your senior project if you're doing a senior project or have completed one. So one way is simply to put senior thesis or project in your education section, include the title. This is usually done if you want to show that you've done the senior thesis or project, but you don't, maybe it's not related to what you're applying to, and you don't want to kind of use the space on the resume to explain it further. But, the other option is, especially for someone who's doing more of a research-based project or a very hands-on project, Amy's going to put it in a research section and maybe include other research that they've done there, or independent studies or outside research, and describe. But if your senior project was, writing a play, then that may be under a writing experience section. If it was exhibiting in a show, that may go under an exhibit section. So it really depends on what you did, what you're doing. So this is just kind of one example. And then you'll notice then Amy goes into an experience section, which is really related experience to what we assume she wants to be doing, right? And the experience section you highlight first can really change depending on what you're applying to. Any questions? No? All right. I'm going to go on to the next. So this page is kind of that next part of the resume. This is all a one-page resume. This is actually a sample we have in one of our guides. But what you'll see kind of here is these other sections, right? So highlighting related experience, which was done on the first slide, but then not forgetting this additional experience such as leadership, the part-time work, the volunteer experiences, and so forth. And we'll look at some other sections coming up. So for Amy, they had enough leadership experience to make a leadership section. Is a leadership section required? No. But if it's how you want to brand yourself and you've had 1 or 2 solid leadership experiences, you could make a section called leadership. The same thing goes if you're applying in education and you've been tutoring and TAing and doing things education related, you could have a teaching experience section. You could really brand your headings. So you'll also see that for Amy, they have a lot of those really 3 solid related experiences that we saw on the slide prior, but they also want to show that they worked at the library while they were on campus and that they were a host in summers at a restaurant. But they didn't want to spend a lot of time describing them because of the space limits of the resume. So simply to kind of show experience that isn't as related, it only takes up these 2 lines, right? It says where it is, the title, and when it happened. And that's a way to really kind of get some additional experience you want to show on the resume, because again, you're going to talk about this experience in an interview, at least for them to know that you have it. And then you'll see a volunteer experience section. Now, volunteer experience could really be written in many different ways. I actually just spoke to a class about this. For Amy, the volunteer experience was something that they wanted to show, but not really fully describe. But for some of you, you may have volunteer experience, which is very much related to what you want to be doing. So you may just have that in your main experience section, especially if it's something that's robust and that you were, let's say, doing for 3 months, a couple of times a week. So again, it's very personal where you put things. It doesn't have to be housed under volunteer. But for Amy, that's what worked. Any questions? No? Okay. Sorry. Okay. So this is just one more sample of a resume to show you some different ways of formatting, as well as just some different sections that you can have as well. I do want to kind of say, we're just talking about the contact header. You'll see that these samples do have full addresses in them, but if you are not comfortable with putting your full address on your resume, or let's say it's going to be in a resume book or something, or somewhere where a number of employers can see it, you really can just put your town or city and state, and that is fine too. But you will see here that Ellen has their website on there, and definitely if you have a website or LinkedIn or a portfolio site, that is a great place to put it. I will say, like, it is great to have one place for an employer to go. So I definitely have seen, especially let's say in film, where there are a lot of different links to different projects, whether it's on YouTube or somewhere else, but it is great if you have one place they can go and then kind of link to everything else as well. But of course, if that doesn't work, you can definitely hyperlink text. Most people are reading this on a screen, and you could hyperlink different projects as well too. So you'll see here, this is a different format. It's a column format. There's really a focus on one side of education and skills, and then one side of the different experience. You'll also see, kind of different types of training under education, not just college, but a specific training workshop. You'll also see selected projects. So projects are really important. And projects come in all different areas, whether it's the arts, whether it's social sciences, humanities. It's not just, one area. Everyone could have projects. So for example, a student who is a computer science major may be working on their own personal projects, or their, their own coding projects, their projects they're just doing for them. maybe with the hope that it's going to go further, but really more for learning and for them. So personal projects can go here too. Of course, academic projects, and then specific projects you may want to highlight from a job or internship or freelance experience. So, and this kind of goes for writers too. I think sometimes we see, let's say, a creative writing student who is comfortable enough to put their academic projects on the resume, but is also saying, well, I've been writing, I write short stories, or I am writing a novel, but it's not published yet. But you can still put the project on. You could have a separate section for publications. So, projects are a great way to kind of bring in skill, the things you're doing, if you don't have another place to put them. It's also a place that you could put your senior project as well, and other academic projects. Any questions? No, okay. Seeing how I'm doing on time, good, okay. So let's talk about some additional sections. So really, especially for those of you who have recently graduated, who are already working, a summary or highlight section on top of the resume can be really helpful if done right. And this is just one example of it here, that social media marketing professional. But you can see what they're doing in this summary, right? They're kind of selling themselves. They're putting a recognition. They're putting that quantifying number. They're letting them know some key things they want them to know about. So think of it as the elevator pitch of your resume. So for those of you who may not know what an elevator pitch is, that is basically saying that, pitching yourself to someone in the time it would take to take an elevator ride. So it's really what a hiring manager would need to know for you in that brief moment, the first things they see, so they don't have to kind of delve deeper into the resume. Obviously, we hope that they do, but if there's a few things that you really want them to know up top, then that is key. Now, sometimes this really kind of transforms more into a skills section. So, for somebody who is applying for a job where it's very specific that they know, they need to know these certain skills, or they're not even going to be considered certain software, certain languages like computer languages, or languages. You may want to just put that up top and make it more of a summary / skills section as well. It really kind of depends on your industry. Any questions about the summary before I move on? Just checking. No? Okay. So here are just some other sections that you can have as well. So coursework highlights is a section that you could have under education. It's optional. I feel like it's best if maybe you don't have as much work or internship or other type of experience in the area that you're studying, and that's the area that you're going towards in your job search. But you really want to show them some of the courses you've taken that they may not even assume you've taken. So for example, this student is a journalism student. So they're not putting like J1, J2, but they're putting some things that maybe the person reading the resume wouldn't assume they've taken, right? So music journalism, or race, gender, and the media, advanced broadcast. So it's something that can kind of highlight. It definitely can change depending where you're applying for, and eventually it won't be on the resume. It really is something mostly for students and recent graduates, I would say. That's not to say that projects may not still be on the resume, but just this kind of course highlight section. Same kind of goes for activities. So activities definitely for students, recent grads. It's great to show your involvement in college on or off campus. And again, kind of showing you as this overall person and everything that you've done. Activities can be done like this, where you're kind of describing what you've done. We've already mentioned that if your roles are more leadership based, it could be a leadership section. But again, this is I would say a section that will eventually come off the resume or evolve, meaning, you may continue to do activities. So let's say somebody who on the Purchase College baseball team continued to play in a league, a community league. So they may continue to put that, but maybe they move to more volunteering their time to help coaching. But maybe then that goes in the volunteer section. So it can evolve. But you know, if you didn't continue in doing kind of these outside activities to add to it, then you'd probably eventually, the section would come off. It all depends what you continue to do after purchase as well. And then professional affiliations. Some of you may already be members, student members, or as a recent graduate, be members of different professional organizations. Some of you may have had the chance to present even at, let's say, if it was last year's senior symposium, or just, you know, within professional organizations you joined, or something you'll be doing in the future. So this could be really just membership in a professional organization, or something a bit deeper, like let's say being a committee chair. Any questions? Okay. So then just a couple more kind of like areas that you could include. I wanted to show a skills example where there are subheading or subcategories. So this is a resume for a student who is in the School of Art and Design, and really kind of wanting to hone down on the different skill sets. So drawing and painting, but like not, you know, beyond just drawing and painting, sculpture, digital design, computer language. So it can make it a little bit easier for the reader. And again, it's all about finding things easily. And then, you know, sections like a freelance section. Now, freelance work can definitely be described fuller, especially if you're doing a lot of it. But again, if it's something that's more, you're using part of your resume for describing other things, and you want to simply talk about what you've been doing, or there's a lot of things you've been doing and you don't have a lot of room to say it, you can simply list it like this. So just another example of being able to show without describing fully yet, waiting for that for the interview. And then definitely honors, awards, achievements. And this is something that's academic, not academic, and you know, definitely get something that can stay on the resume for as long as that you have achievements, awards that you want to show. And then really what else? So anything. So exhibits, performances, gigs, fellowships, residencies, hobbies, interests, publications, and more. It really is about what you have done. And we can definitely help with that at the Career Development Center. It's very personal, right? So really having that conversation about what you've done and the best way to get that on the resume. Any questions before we talk more about formatting? No? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about resume format. As I mentioned up top, you know, the samples that I showed you in this presentation were just 2 samples of many ways that you can do your resume. Again, the most important thing is clear and concise and consistent, and understanding your industry and what expectations they have for the resume as well. So let's talk about a few different ways to format. So obviously there's a document format using Microsoft Word or Google Docs. As long as you know how to tab and bullet and column and space and play with all of that, you can definitely just format your own resume. I will say templates in Google Docs and Microsoft Word definitely give you less freedom of spacing and layout. They're usually really just inserting a table, and you can't play as much with it. So my advice is, if you're going to use one of those, use a clean document and format it yourself. Of course, there's also more of a design graphic layout. So somebody who's skilled in InDesign, Illustrator, other software, and using that to create the resume. Obviously, this kind of gives some more options, definitely like typography. And, you know, it's definitely, if you have the skill, it's a great way to show an example of that skill. But the key is to still keep it in a simple and clean format. You still want it readable, and you want the person looking at it just have that information kind of pop out. There are free online templates as well if you don't have the graphic software skills, but you want the look. But what is very, very key is do not pay for an online resume tool I have seen some students start a free resume, then at the end, or to get the document they wanted them to pay. You definitely do not, if you're formatting a resume first and you have questions, just email it to us at career.development and somebody will look at it and help with formatting. But also, if you want a bit more of a different look, there's places like Canva online. So Canva will let you create a free account and have access to a nice amount of free resume templates. The key is, as you go, you kind of hover over the thumbnails and you see like the free label. So like we've been using Canva for years for our social media posts, the free version, and we have not really come into anything yet where I was like, I wish I had the paid version. So that's just another option as well if you want a little bit of a different look. But again, really kind of thinking about your industry and what you want to get across. So obviously always double check for grammar and spelling errors. That's really a big thing that is being looked for. And really, you know, the best if you're either uploading a file or emailing, you submitting it as a PDF is usually the best way to go, unless you're directed otherwise. So for example, if it's a document, you know, obviously it's Google Docs, you don't necessarily want to share the doc, you know, save it, download it as a PDF and share it. Same with Word. And then definitely, you know, sometimes I'll receive a resume in like a JPEG, but I think PDF still is better for the reader as well. So just something to think about. Any questions about formatting or anything else so far? Okay. So let's just talk a little bit about resume to LinkedIn, or just resume and LinkedIn. So even beyond LinkedIn, your resume should align with your professional digital presence, but it doesn't have to exactly match. I mean, because each piece of your presence can show a little something else, right? Whether it's LinkedIn, a portfolio site, your own website, though everything should be giving the same message, it can have some different information. So sort of like, you know, really kind of looking at what each can do for you. So one of the benefits of LinkedIn is that it will allow you to show your expertise through other things, right, than your profile. So through posts, engagement, and the more narrative parts of your profile, like being able to describe things fuller, having that about section, and so forth. Look at that, like the limitations of the resume, there's my typo, can lead to more telling than showing, right? So what I mean by that is, you know, it's kind of like the input out thing, right? Like telling versus showing. You want to show someone what you did. Well, yes, we definitely say that for the resume, but if your industry wants a one-page resume, it's a little bit harder. You know, experience and descriptions on LinkedIn can show a bigger story. There's more room and you can use personal pronouns. So it's something to think about, you know. Definitely, even when I work with somebody who doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, I will say start with at least just moving things over from the resume so that it's a starting point. But then you can definitely see, like, what can I show that's different on LinkedIn? What language can I use differently? So that it's a bit different from my resume. Because LinkedIn does allow for more of that personal tone, especially in the about section. Now, one of the things that may be a bit more, I won't say negative, but on the other side, is that you only have one LinkedIn profile. You could have 5 different versions of your resume, but you're only going to have one LinkedIn. So you really have to think about, if you're targeting a few different areas in your job search, really, especially like your contact header, your headline, your about section, you know, you may have to make it a little bit broader too. And then I would say that may go for different professional presence online as well, depending on what you're doing. Are there any questions? No? All right. Well, I have one more slide. We're going to talk a little bit about cover letters just for a few minutes, but then we'll open it up more, you know, stop sharing the screen and we could open it up a little bit more to questions as well. So just a few cover letter tips, because I can't talk about resume without talking about cover letter, because most likely you will be submitting a cover letter with your resume. So I'm assuming most of you have written a cover letter, but just to really kind of think about this, especially as you go into your next search. So use the cover letter to focus your interests and show your passion and motivation. So that's really key. It's really, the cover letter lets you write normally and lets you show why you're interested. Really look at that job description that you're applying to, the responsibilities and qualifications, and really think about what you should address. And it's not always just specific skills or specific experience. Sometimes they're giving hints in there about the type of person they're looking for, the type of personality. And you really want to think about that. If you're like, wow, I keep seeing this thread in this description, so I should probably mention that. And really demonstrate, why you want to work for that organization and why in that role. And again, a cover letter, is a few paragraphs. You're not going crazy. So it's not like you have to write so much for each area, but think about kind of answering these general questions, right? The why am I writing? So a brief introduction of who you are. Why do I want to work intern for your organization? So why them, but then also the why this field a little bit too. But the why them is very important. They really want to know, well, do you know about us? And this opportunity. So what excites you about this opportunity as well? And then of course, why you're qualified as well. But they have your resume to see generally how you're qualified. The cover letter lets them see how you perceive your qualifications fitting into that opportunity. So that's something to definitely think about as well. Cover letter will obviously be a different letter for every place you apply to, but that's not to say you shouldn't, save your cover letters. Just like, let's say if you have them all like in Google Drive and you're applying to, again, these 5, maybe 3 different areas, you may have a cover letter that's focused on one area, and then you can copy it, definitely change the why then, but maybe the why you part won't change as much. So, though it does have to be different every time, it may not be a full reinvention of the letter as well. Any questions with cover letters? No, okay. So I'm going to open up to hopefully questions in in a few, and stop the screen share in a sec. But just to know, and I can give you this information again. So, right now we are all working at the Career Development Center. We're just not physically at the Career Development Center. But you can email us, and we're making Zoom appointments. It could be phone if you're more comfortable with that, but I think everyone so far has been doing a Zoom appointment, and we're happy to meet with you, answer quick questions. We're doing Zoom walk-in hours as well as chat. So really we're accessible, and we're here all summer. Sometimes we're asked if we're here, but we are here. Definitely you can reach out to us, whether it's for an appointment or a quicker question. So I'm actually going to stop this share. I will be sending this to all of you too. So does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Is there some kind of, what kind of access can I have to application tracking systems pertaining to my specific field that I want to be in?
So can I ask what field you are looking into?
Art direction. So basically I studied advertising design in my undergraduate degree at SUNY FIT.
Okay.
And then I just accomplished my MFA in the Media Arts and Culture program.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's so funny to be on the video chat.
So what I would say is, definitely, do a little bit of research, Google is your friend, to see within that field if applicant tracking systems are being used, but also if, I don't know, through your experience so far, through internships or just relationships with professors, just if you have connections already within the field, who may know or may be able to connect you with someone who may know as well about the trends that are going on with, within the art, within art direction, if they're using that type of software, And sometimes it really depends on the organization. So a much larger organization may be using it for everyone, depending on the position, doesn't matter what the position is, whereas some smaller places wouldn't be, because it also costs money for the organization as well. But that would be my advice. Definitely research it, but also think about who you have in your life, who you can ask, colleagues, people you work with, professors who may be able to give you some more inside information. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, are there any walk-in hours today for the resume? Because I would love, as soon as possible.
I'm like, I should know that. Like, what are the I have too many screens up. So today, let me pull this up, career development. So I will say this, so with a resume, you can definitely, for a quick thing, is email it to us. But if you want to do more of like a Zoom walk-in, today is Wednesday from 3 to 4:30. So that's actually, if you go to our website, I'll put it, actually, I'll just put the link to the chat hours here. So here you go. So yeah, this link will take you to the schedule for the Zoom walk-ins and the link and the Zoom link. So Jeffrey Arroyo is on the Zoom hours today.
Okay, and how does that work? Do I just log in first person?
So it's like a regular walk-in. So there's a waiting room. If he is with someone else, there may be a 10-minute wait. But if not, then he'll just let you right in from the waiting room.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. Okay. Are there career-specific resume reviewers in the Career Development Center, or are they more general? I would definitely say we are more generalists. There are some areas that maybe some of us work more with. So if you wanted to, like, let's say, email your resume, or just email your question to career.development@purchase.edu, then it goes to all of us. So we all see it. So then one of us can say, oh, you know what, I'll take this one, because it's maybe an area, but we are all generalists.
And is anyone, just out of curiosity, in your department, is there anyone who has a background in the commercial arts or advertising?
So yeah, no, so for the counselors, for those of us working, our background as far as like training and background is in counseling. But we do a lot of training within different industry areas, research, and just continual training as well. But we also then have connections to employers, alumni as well in specific areas. Are there any other questions? Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining. This is our first in like our series of workshops. I will definitely, I just saw, so what I'm gonna do is today I will send everyone who registered, which you had to do to be here for the workshop, the PDF of the presentation, and then some of those other links as well, and then just some other information too. But really, thank you so much. I will just stay on for a minute or so in case anyone else has a question, but everyone else is welcome to leave. And I really appreciate it. Again, I'm Jessica. You can always reach me at jessica.mazzia, M-A-Z-Z-I-A, at Purchase, or you can always reach the whole Career Development Center at career.development. And thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, looks like everyone is leaving or left, so I'm going to end the meeting. And thank you guys.